So I can't adjourn us into this meeting, but thank you very much for coming today to the State Solutions to the Broadband Challenge. Of course, this is the first full day of NCSL, which means we're already thinking about taking our flights home. So I'm going to try not to make this too boring. We do it. You know how it is. By Wednesday, we're all whatever. So we're going to get going here on the show. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act created $65 billion that are now being distributed to states throughout the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program, better known as BEAD. This past June, the NTIA and Biden administration announced the funding allocation that each state will receive. State broadband offices are essential to this task and now must develop plans for these funds to deploy high-speed internet to their underserved and underserved residents. Today, we want to discuss how states are utilizing their state broadband offices, what lessons they have learned, and what remains to be done. Thank you for joining us here in Indianapolis, and for those watching online, my name is your name here, Justin Wilmoth, Arizona, State Representative, Far North Phoenix. I am the Commerce Chairman back home, and here I'm the co-chair of the NCSL Communications, Financial Services, and Interstate Commerce Committee. So what I'm going to do here, we want this to obviously be an interactive discussion between our panelists here to my left and our audience, so be thinking of those questions and be ready to participate here after they present. When you have a question, please use the microphones that are in the middle. You'll be able to line up, and then I will recognize you, and if you get out of line, I'll kick you out. So I'm going to take a moment here to introduce all of our panelists, and then I'm going to kick it over to them individually for them to do their presentations. First up is Tamara Holmes. She's the director of the Virginia Office of Broadband. Wave to everybody real quick. We got to know who these people are because the font size is like 12. She's the director of the Office of Broadband at DHCD and has been in that role since September of 2019. She has spent 20 years in the public sector in the field of community and economic development. Dr. Holmes plays an instrumental role in the creation of the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, having served as the lead development of the program. To her left is Sally Doty. She's the director of the Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi. She was named by Governor Tate Reeves as the first director of the Office of Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi. Sally is an attorney, most recently served as the executive director of the Mississippi Public Utilities staff. She also previously served 3 terms in the Mississippi Senate, so that means she's reformed. You're smarter than me. Representing Southwest Mississippi. I was crazy enough to run twice. I don't know why. Finally, far to the left is Joseph Lee, the Deputy Director of Broadband Development in the state of Kansas. He started his role at the Kansas Office of Broadband Development as Deputy Director in January of 2023. Prior to that, Joseph served previously as the Chief of Staff for Kansas House Minority Leader Tom Sawyer. They painted fences, I guess, right? Serving as the leader's top aide and overseeing the House Minority Leadership, staff, and the House Caucus. I guess nobody reads anymore. That's okay. So we're going to get started here. Tamara, go ahead and start. We're going to give them each about 10 minutes, and at the end, we will field some questions. So just keep those in mind as we go along. So please go ahead.
Okay. I don't know why I always end up going first on these panels.
Because
Sally?
you're the benchmark.
No,
You're the
I thought you
benchmark.
said something else, but no.
We've been doing some panels together.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
We've been doing some panels together.
Sally and I have spent the last 3 weeks together
Yes.
on broadband panels. And so just to give you a little bit about our program, and so they gave us kind of set of talking points, and so I'm going to try to stay on script. And so for us, we've had the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, which has been our last mile deployment program. Before we actually had a broadband office, our program goes back to 2017 when the former governor, then Governor McAuliffe, and the General Assembly allocated, which some of our members of our General Assembly are in here, so I'd like to thank them for their investments in last mile deployment. So we went from $1 million program in 2017 to a $750 million program in 2021. Through the investment of both state general funds, American Rescue Plan, and capital project funds. And so through that, we've now invested $935 million to connect over 400,000 locations to broadband. And so what's really important about our program, which is different, and we'll talk a little bit about BEAD, is that it's a true public-private partnership. In Virginia, a unit of local government, it could be a planning district commission, or if you're in the Appalachian region, they're called local development districts. A broadband authority or a county or city will come in and they identify their private sector partner. And so for us, it was really important that, one, I'm at a housing and community development agency, and so we do not give money directly to the private sector as an agency, and 2, our stakeholders primarily are communities, and so it was really important for us to make sure that Our localities were at the table as we were identifying and developing the program because they know where folks have service within their communities and where they lack service. And so through those partnerships, we're currently working in 80 counties and cities building out broadband. Other question they talked about was what are we doing when it comes to BEAD? And so I know my colleagues to the left will talk a little bit about their respective plans. And so we've already submitted volume 1. So NTIA requires several documents be submitted, got to check a lot of boxes to access the money. We are, as, is a delegate or senator, what is state representative?
Representative.
Okay, representative, it's different in my state. So
Yeah.
Representative Wilmer said.
Mental patience.
Talked about the allocations, and to my surprise, we received $1.48 billion in allocation through the forthcoming BEAD program. And so some of the challenges that we anticipate, one, we're a program, you heard me say, it's a public-private partnership. It's truly been that. Unfortunately, the BEAD funding has to go directly to the private sector. And so for us, one of the challenges will be still incentivizing local coordination and involvement of local governments in the BEAD program as we move forward with the funding. The other piece that's a challenge is we've had a program that's been successful now 6 cycles. And so now taking that program and the things that work within that program and making it fit into the BEAD program, which is like a square peg, round hole for us, we're working through those struggles. And then the last piece really is determining what part is required in the actual application versus the contractual requirements with the federal money. I have 21 years of federal grants experience, and I will tell you this is probably the most burdensome federal program that I probably will administer in my career, and I come from a background of HUD, so that gives you guys some sense of what I think about the BEAD requirements. I'm really excited about the money. I'm excited that for us, we will actually be able to commit all the funding needed to make sure that every home, business, and community anchor has access to universal broadband with $1.48 billion and have money left over to really look at adoption and affordability, which is important as we look at subscribership. And I know Sally will talk about that because we've been on panels for the last 2 weeks together. And so for us, we've on average had a 60% take rate on our projects through our investments. And so we'd like to sustain that and see that increased. And so make a shameless plug, I know you all don't have a role in it, but the ACP program is really important to making sure that folks can afford broadband service within their respective communities. Another piece is staying technology agnostic. By having a program that's primarily been funded with general fund dollars, we've been able to invest in both fiber, fixed wireless projects, and so BEAD, if you don't know about it, it does have a preference for fiber, which is considered the gold standard. However, we do know we have hollers and mountains in Virginia, and so fixed wireless and other technologies may be a solution. And so still having state general fund dollars allows us the flexibility to still invest in those alternative technologies where BEAD may not allow us to do so. The next piece they want us to really talk about was devices. And so for us, we've primarily focused on infrastructure around access. And so through the digital equity funds, which we're calling the development of a digital opportunity plan, we've recently conducted an asset inventory of what organizations are doing work in the communities, whether they're providing digital literacy opportunities, whether they're distributing devices. And so through that digital equity funds, we've conducted an asset inventory. And so we'll be looking at how to use the BEAD funding to invest in sustainable opportunities to not only make sure that everyone has access, but that folks can utilize the access once they have it, whether it's at their home or at a community anchor. And then the last couple of things that's really important for us, am I still in my 10 minutes?
You gotta, I'll give you a few more. No,
Okay.
You can have some of mine.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
and so the last piece I really wanted, one of the questions was how can we collaborate better with the feds and states? And I have some of my state representatives here, and so we've all heard about the FCC auctions, and I want to be transparent about that. And so one of the challenges for us, where I think there needs to be better coordination, is with the Federal Communications Commission around these auctions. We do have parts of Virginia where CAF2 has not still been built out by providers who won these auctions back in 2018, and so the BEAD money is prohibitive. We can't take the BEAD money and go anywhere where the auctions are, and so while these providers have not officially defaulted, they've technically defaulted based on their initial milestones from the FCC. And so for us, I would like better coordination. The first step is the BEAD money was block granted to the states because we know how to do it better, right, guys? And so I would like better coordination with the auctions. We are really struggling in Virginia with some of the providers who in essence didn't have a presence within our state that won some of these auctions. And so it's more expensive to build out. The auctions, I mean, I had one provider bid $100 a household for a build out through the auction. I will tell you that on average, our state investment was $3,500 per location. So if you have a provider bid $100 through an auction, and we know we spent an average of $3,500, they did that intentionally to block out competition, right? And so what that does is leave these Swiss cheese holes in our state where the auctions may or may not deliver. And of course, if you think about the time frame with ARPA, so ARPA money has to be obligated by 2024, spent by 2026. The BEAD money, I'm still trying to figure out, it's 7 years I hear, but I don't know when the 7-year clock starts. And so the federal auctions that were delivered, CAF 2, I thought was supposed to be done, I guess, next year. We got a provider that still has not built out their obligations fully. And then the RDOF has through 2028, I can't remember, 2028, 2030. And so just think about the overlapping of both the auctions and the potential defaults and the left out communities versus where we can make BEAD investments. And so those are the things that we are talking about and how we can both use the power of our bodies together as state broadband directors, but also shameless plug for our state legislators to help support that as well. And so with that, I'll let Sally talk.
Let's go ahead and set it. Thank you very much for that. Now we're going to go from Virginia to the land of the Egg Bowl. Sally, go ahead and tell us about Mississippi.
Thank you very much. So this is such a problem. Perhaps I'll kind of start with that. Thursday night, I was at an extremely heated community engagement meeting where people were yelling because we had that same situation. Mississippi was very well represented in the RDOF auction. Y'all all heard of the RDOF auction. We had a very big RDOF award to different carriers in Mississippi. But what that means is those areas are not eligible for this BEAD funding or CPF funding or other federal funding. So you can't stack this broadband funding. And so that's been part of the issue in Mississippi, is really figuring out where our unserved and underserved locations are. That's what we've been focused on, because we do have a good bit, well, we've got just a big build out that's been going on regardless with our electric co-ops in Mississippi. They have really led the charge. Initially, I was in the legislature for 10 years in the Senate. We gave our electric co-ops about $65 million out of CARES Act funding, and that really got some of them off the fence and got them into building. We'd previously, the year before, given them the authority to be in the broadband business. So that was kind of what got them in there. And so our electric co-ops have really led the charge. So they've got a big build out going on. Then we had a very large RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, I think that's it, yes. RDOF award in Mississippi. Then there is USDA that has Reconnect and other programs. So there's also other funding programs out there. And then we still have a little bit of CAF 2 as well. So, you've got to figure out where your truly unserved and underserved locations are. So our office has only been in existence for a year. Last year at this time, I was still trying to hire employees and get the ones I had, try to get them a computer. So we have had to really leapfrog ahead. Fortunately, our mapping contractor that we hired, very future looking, and were able to help us develop that map in Mississippi and get our data up there quickly so we could start looking at it and making decisions. We are still in the application process for our capital projects funds. We were late getting approved for that, but we ran a challenge among our providers. In other words, we put our map up and said, okay, this is what we think is eligible, this is who we think does not have federal funding, and areas that are still unserved. And we did that with the providers, a voluntary challenge. Of course, I think we said we wouldn't look at their application quite as nicely if they did not participate. But ran that. We had 100,000 challenges that we resolved, and it was so helpful in our map because there are just a lot of mistakes out there. The information that you have to look at all these maps is information that is provided by the internet service providers to the FCC. And in the past, the FCC has only gotten that once a year. And, you know, for example, we had a large provider that just different circumstances, I do not think it was intentional. You know, they over-reported 60,000 locations as being served when they were not. Well, we were watching, caught it, and then they were able to rectify that actually with the FCC before we ever got to our challenge process. But knowing the data is so important. So I've been sitting in your seat before, and I would encourage you to, for your district, know how many unserved locations you have. Do you have pockets that are underserved, meaning they have some older technology, some fixed wireless, maybe some cable out there that hasn't been upgraded? Know what your numbers are for your district. And listen, balance what you hear from the representatives of different entities with what your state broadband office tells you. If someone comes to you, if someone from the cable company, another big provider comes to you with a problem, I would say, okay, let me talk to our state broadband office about it. Don't say I'm going to call the governor's office about it, okay? Please go talk to the broadband office first. Talk to the broadband office first, because we can probably tell you what the true numbers are and kind of maybe where there is a problem. So I would encourage that. The one thing we're concerned about in Mississippi, we have $1.2 billion that's been awarded in BEAD funding. If you don't know how much your state has gotten in BEAD funding, you should find that out. You should know that. I would think you all do if y'all are all sitting in this room. But we have $1.2 billion. It is based on our number of unserved and some underserved. Our unserved is 268,000 locations in Mississippi. Underserved, we're kind of still working on that. But we think we're going to have close to enough money when you add our capital projects fund. We may need another 100 million or so, I think, to truly reach everyone with universal service. But you know, it is such an opportunity. The one thing we're worried about, and I'll finish up with this. Well, I'm worried about many things because this is a huge undertaking. But one thing that I want to talk about is the take rate. And for people who have not had broadband service in their home, they've operated perhaps with their cell phone, maybe they get some support, Lifeline or a different program, some federal support already. They don't perhaps understand the importance of having broadband in their home, and we're concerned about the take rate. The more people who take service, the stronger that network is. And so that is something that's going to be very important as we look in the future.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to go to our final panelist, Joseph, from Kansas, and both my brother and sister were born in Liberal. My question to you is, does Liberal even have the internet yet?
We're going to keep working on it.
It's the far southwest corner in the middle of nowhere. If you know your geography, you'd laugh really hard at that. Sir, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And like my two colleagues here next to me here, the Office of Broadband Development in Kansas is also fairly new in its current capacity. As of last year in the midsummer, there was only just 2 people, and I'm happy to say that as of today, we are now at 9, hoping to get to 10 before the end of this year right now. But there's still a lot of work to be done. In that time frame, we've also managed to hire on 2 consulting firms to advise us, as well as a mapping firm to kind of work on our maps as well. Kind of where we have gone from and to where we are today on BEAD. We hosted a broadband summit earlier this year with over 200 plus registrants. Those included community advocates, ISP providers, state agencies, and any other relevant folks that wanted to be a part of these conversations. And that kind of helped kick off where we want to be, what we're hearing from the communities, and led us to kind of acknowledge that there's still a lot of outreach we need to do about what's coming down the pipeline up to the BEAD allocation that we gotten this summer. And that's when we launched into our Broadband Roadshow, which we hit 34 different communities across the state of Kansas, over 10,000 miles driven. I think it's time for the state to provide us a brand new car because we're pretty sure the engine is shot already.
Y'all have a car?
It's shared among many different agencies.
Okay.
You finally got rid of the wagon, huh?
It was a very nice looking minivan that looked like, well, it's hail damage, but you wouldn't think it was hail damage with the amount of hits of it. And so while we were in this roadshow, we really saw that there was two issues. One, of course, was just the acknowledgement that this was going on. I mean, folks just didn't know that this opportunity was ahead of us. And the others is, as my colleagues have, to the next of me have mentioned already, a lot of folks, especially in rural areas, aren't seeing the need for this yet. And so they haven't really engaged with their local leaders, with their state representatives, their state senators, and others about why they need this in their communities. And so outreach for us has been such an important and pinnacle thing for us to focus on. We have been happy to report that not every single community in Kansas is like this, even including some of our rural communities where in northwest Kansas, we had some of our biggest turnouts during our roadshow with over 70 people showing up, fired up, angry, passionate, really emphasizing the need for us to get broadband out there, because it's not just your typical Netflix, Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, checking your emails or anything like that, but it's also about precision agriculture and also making sure that we can get the broadband out there to the farmers that need it in this modern age to get that done. And so for us, continuing that engagement, that community outreach is such an important part of it. And that's why after the roadshow was done, we launched our speed survey test and broadcasted that in every single channel we could to get communities to take those speed surveys. So for us, Kansas so far, we've had 7,199 tests taken. Of those tests, 4,300 of them are unique addresses, and we've identified that 3,300 of those are unserved and underserved areas. These tests and this campaign itself is still ongoing, so we're expecting those numbers to change. But we just launched that early this summer, and we're continuing to see folks report in those numbers. We also understand the importance in Kansas, how we need to have a good relationship with our providers, because in Kansas, I mean, I'm happy to go grab a shovel and learn how to dig a trench and build these fibers into the ground, but we know that we can't, as an office, as a state department, do that. And so we really do rely on our ISP providers to be able to help us with this work. And so in recognition of this, we've established a bi-weekly meeting, an industry roundtable, if you would, to bring those providers as well as ourselves to these conversations to be able to hear from them directly what's going on, what's working, what's not. Are we aligned with what you're thinking? Are they aligned with what we're thinking? And then try to solve any conflicts of confusion amongst what our intentions is with many of the state grant programs that we've been doing. You know, the data gathering, discussions, and mapping we've done thus far has really informed our work on our 5-year action plan, initial proposal, volume 1 and volume 2. We are planning to launch our 5-year action plan and have that publicly available before the end of this month. Our volume 1 is also up online now. The draft of it is, and the public window for volume 1 closes at the end of this month. And so while we're working on volume 2, one of the things that we were able to achieve was a very preliminary cost model for the state of Kansas. And what we're looking at right now is it's going to cost $1 billion in Kansas to get us to where we'd like to be with that universal access. With a predicted technology usage of about 75% fiber, and also the realization that fixed wireless may help cover where fiber cannot, and that's about 25% as well. Again, a very preliminary cost model of what we're looking at, but that kind of puts the state of Kansas at about a little over, right under $300 million short once you added all the federal funds and state funds together that we've had so far as a state of Kansas. And so where we are with this, just like our colleagues over here, is we really want to focus on the engagement, the collaborative efforts. We want the NTIA and the FCC to continue to improve their channels of communication. I will tell you, we've had sleepless nights because guidance was either really late or were just very confusing to provide it. And so what we're really going to try to do is continue to keep the channel of dialogues open with our providers, our community advocates, such as during our digital equity planning processes, and really try to emphasize the need for us to make sure that the constituents know not only what's going on, but what's available to come to their communities to best serve them.
All right, well, thank you guys for all of that. We'll give them a mini round of applause here real quick while we do a little tap dancing here. So now we're to the open waters of questions. I know that every one of these is like a junior high dance, and you guys are going to stand on the corners and wait for somebody to make a move. So I'm going to ask the first question, and then if you have questions, please line up behind the microphone, and we will give you a moment. The question that I'm going to go with is, each one of you guys, a sentence or four, looking forward, once the federal infrastructure funding expires, where do you think the states will be in their broadband deployment, and then how will they shift the costs to take care of that?
I went first last time.
I think everybody's going to have a bit of a shortfall, whether it is, you know, 100 million or whatever. I think there are going to be some shortfalls. And so then is going to be the issue of sustaining these networks. For example, in Mississippi, we're going to have some networks out in some extremely rural areas. And the operational costs to maintain those are going to be difficult. Certainly, we're going to look at that when they apply for grant funding and try to find the most financially stable opportunity, but it's going to be an ongoing problem. And then also, as I mentioned before, the take rate, the more people who take service, the stronger that network is going to be. Those are going to be, I think, the issues.
Yeah, everything that you've hit is right on there. And for us, we're going to continue to work as much as we can to look at what that shortcoming is and how we can best utilize our engagement efforts to bring attention to advocacy, to really bring more and more folks to the table, not just like all of you, state representatives, legislators, but also trying to engage our congressional delegation to really emphasize the needs that there's still going to be shortcomings. This whole BEAD plan is not the be-all, end-all. A lot of folks are looking, well, some states got $1 billion, some states got $500 million. I mean, shouldn't that solve the problem? It's not going to. And this is also an evolving technology. I'm pretty young on this panel here, but I still remember when.
But I can't bail you out of that one, my friend. Vaya con Dios. Wow.
I still remember very vividly thinking that 5 megabytes per second to download a picture was super fast when my parents finally got me access to the internet there. And nowadays, I know that we're going into technology like virtual reality, augmented reality, where this technology is not just going to make the case anymore for the speeds that we're looking at. I mean, I can suspect that we're going to be in a situation where you're looking at 1 gigabyte in the near future, who knows how long it'll be, where people will be like, 1 gigabyte is barely enough. And so we need to be able to keep up with that and keep the attention on that need to continue to future-proof what we're putting into the ground now with these plans, as also trying to upgrade what's currently out there.
I think for us, so we're one of the few states will have enough money to, I'm sorry, guys. We'll have enough money to, I've been apologizing for like 4 weeks now. And so we'll be one of the few states that will have enough money to completely close the digital divide from an infrastructure standpoint. I think our biggest challenge is the non-deployment side, because that's not something that we as a state has tackled. And so we're going to have to look at our other state agencies and other partners within our state who have address these needs within communities and be able to help them scale up, but also to identify ways to sustain it, because this is a once in a lifetime. And yes, I'm old enough to remember when I had a Apple computer that did a little thing across the screen. So I am older than you, Joseph. And so I used to dial up on a phone and you plug it into your laptop and it would, anyway. But I think for us, the struggle is going to be the non-deployment and the sustainability of non-deployment. And to Sally's point, I think it's very important that we continue to make investments in companies that are, one, financially solvent, stable, companies that will be around, that aren't just going to get in this business to build out a network and eventually turn it over to someone else, because that's important. I mean, for so long, our rural communities have been left behind, and so it's important that we continue to invest in, which is one of our challenges now, our small and mid-sized providers. That's who's primarily taking it and been partners in our program. And so some of these BEAD rules will potentially preclude some of them from participating. And so the challenges are for us really looking at what's next after deployment, but also making sure the folks who have been partners in building out rural Virginia stay at the table regardless of the federal rules, and that they continue to build out those networks and operate them effectively.
Thank you for that, everybody. And just so everybody knows, after this, Joseph can get on his broadband and go to Google and look up, how do I sleep on the couch? That's how. So we've got about 20 more minutes for questions, which is really awesome. I'm going to try to be quiet most of the rest of the time. This gentleman up here, I believe, was first, then I'm going to go back to a couple and then back to you, sir. Everybody that speaks, please give us your name and where you're from, and then ask your question, and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. Spence Purnell with the Reason Foundation. Just have two quick questions. As it relates to unserved communities, I wonder if your states are looking at using the ACP for wireless internet, things like Starlink. I just think that a demand-side subsidy potentially has less opportunity for sunk costs, underutilized networks. A demand-side subsidy that utilizes wireless internet that isn't just tied to a cabled line, I think could be valuable. So I want to know if you guys were looking into that. And then as it relates to underserved communities, in July of last year, Netflix reduced its speed recommendations by about 40%. It used to be about 25 megabytes download for a 4K video. Now it's down to 15. They're doing this through things like compression, peering, other technologies. Why is the government and other people around ACP and BEAD not talking about these changes? I think there's definitely areas where people are underserved, but I also see a lot of real-world studies in the last 3 to 5 years suggesting that most people with 100 download speed are using about 20% of it. I mean, you could run multiple 4K streams, be gaming, and web browsing, and you're probably not even using 50 megabytes. So I just want to encourage the community to think about this trend. There are certain technologies like virtual reality, maybe certain commercial uses that are going to use a gig, but in general, the trend in private household use is that there's less bandwidth being used because the big bandwidth hogs are coming up with technologies like compression and peering. So just two thoughts, comments, questions for the panel.
Anybody jump out?
Certainly. Thinking about it.
I'll take a stab at it. As it relates to your first question about ACP and what if we're looking at fixed wireless or other options to kind of utilize those ones. I mean, for Kansas, the emphasis is and will continue to be fiber to the ground, fiber to the home, because that's the most future-proof, reliable, scalable technology that we can look at right now. We absolutely, as I kind of mentioned earlier in my presentation, do recognize that in certain areas, especially the geographically distressed areas, the terrain and other variables that may play a part into it, that solution of fiber to the home is just not going to cut it. And so within our cost model, we kind of analyze that 25% of what we're looking at may be that fixed wireless solution. But to the extent that we can, we're going to continue to really push that fiber to the home just because of that reliability, scalability, and future-proofing that we're looking forward in this fiber deployment.
Agree. I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, and I would say when we've done some numbers crunching in Virginia, what we've actually found is most folks are actually paying their cellular bills with ACP versus actually a wireline connection to a home. And I live in a community where I actively see, I won't say the name of the cellular company, but they have kiosks and they're actively going as people come to pay their bills. They're enrolling them into ACP, which speaks to the need of digital navigators in our states, because the burden that it is to enroll into ACP, you really need, first of all, we're talking about folks that don't have access to internet, using the internet to access a program to get subsidy to pay for the internet. It is like, what in the world? And so we see more folks actually covering their cellular bills with the $30 a month subsidy versus a wireline connection. And as far as usage, I think the issue has been, and I'll just say for us in Virginia, is these communities have been given access to broadband that has meant nothing, to be honest with you, for the most part. Our densely populated areas within these communities got the better broadband, the less dense areas got the not so good broadband, and so why should they not get at least 100 over 20 being available to their home with the ability to go up to a gig? Whether they would use it or not, that's up to the household, but I don't think rural communities should get less than because they're less dense. And so for me, it's important to make sure that there's equity within the state, there's equitable access to all technology that families need. And so that's kind of the stance, and that is not the opinion of the Commonwealth of Virginia. That is the opinion of Dr. Tamara Holmes, who administers our office and whose career has been built on working with rural communities who have experienced not just broadband disparities with access, but economic disparities. And so we want to change the lives of every Virginian, and so access to broadband is just one of those ways we will do that.
The best answer of the day. Let's adjourn. Sir, tell us who you are, where you're from, and your question.
Representative Stephen Meeks, I chair the House Technology Committee, and I remember using a 300 baud modem and thought the 2400 baud modem was a great step forward. My question, just a quick comment. If you've not done a state survey, I would highly recommend it. We did it in Arkansas about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and we found out that we were thankfully not as bad off as we thought we were, and with the BEAD, we were one of the states that should be good to go. But my question is since all 50 states right now are all competing for this money, we're all competing for fiber, we're all competing for the same people to actually put the fiber in. And so my question is do y'all have any incentives, any programs in place to try to develop the labor force to be able to have the people to put all this infrastructure in? One of the complaints I'm getting from our ISPs is we have the money, we just don't have the people, and we're having trouble getting the fiber to actually get it out. So just your thoughts or comments or any suggestions you might have on that.
So for us, we've surveyed all of our internet service providers in Virginia, and for them, some of them it's the workforce, but they've been doing their own. The issue is the training. There's so many different curriculums. We're actually working with our community college system to have a curriculum that can be adapted to all different campuses within the state. But what we've heard the biggest issue is utility locates and make ready are the barriers right now, and we're clapping to that. And so there is no official training to train folks to do utility locates. We actually just finished our workforce development study, which was required as part of the 5-year action plan, and utility locates was the #1 job needed, and not necessarily maybe a fiber technician or a wireless technician. And so one of the things we're doing, and we talked about it when we were in Nevada, was we do get an initial amount of money we could request through BEAD. For us, it'll be important for us to invest in the workforce development system to increase opportunities for jobs, but also looking at non-traditional workforce, maybe look at out-of-school youth and looking at our technical centers within our high schools. And so we're looking at ways to build the workforce, but I think BEAD will allow us to actually take some funding and invest it, because we've been doing broadband since 2017. I like to say since before it was cool. But we haven't seen the workforce needs because we're all scaling up at the same time and competing for the same contractors and the same companies to come build in our states. And so, Sally?
I think it's important to work through your community college system, and that is what we are doing. And we have required providers who are interested in grants, who are applying for grants, to have a meeting with the local community college and discuss with their workforce development. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go on. Sir, name, place, question.
Hi, I'm Theo Marcus, and I'm with the Federal Communications Commission.
Ooh,
Good, great.
hello. This is an inspection. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
That's the other side of the shop. Tamara, I'm also a resident of rural Spotsylvania County.
Oh, well, you guys need broadband. I
You
know
work for me.
that. Yes, I do work for you.
And Sally, half my family's from Indianola, Mississippi.
I've been there many times.
Appreciate you all being up here. Let's talk, make sure your phone calls are getting answered about CAF2 funding.
I think did you see the letter that went in? Okay, thank you.
If you're not satisfied, let us know.
Okay.
I'm here with my colleague, Bridget Gomez. And here's what I'd be interested in. I looked into this a few weeks ago and couldn't find anything. I recognize that some of these state broadband offices and digital equity offices are new or new-ish. But have you begun coalescing? Have you reached that network strength where we can start seeing ideas being shared? I understand that there's competitive forces when you're talking about scarce dollars. But at the same time, there are so many things that are common. I'm wondering if you all have been getting together with other state broadband officials and digital equity officials to start putting the common issues on the table and maybe speaking to us with maybe one voice on some of these things.
Well, we're actually all here for the State Broadband, I always butcher that acronym, State Broadband Leadership Network, because we have a Virginia one. And so we're all here actually this week through Thursday meeting with other state broadband leaders from across the country. But to Sally's point earlier, and to Joseph's point, Joseph is new as of this year. Sally's been around for a year. We've been around for 4 years. And to be fairly honest with you, I can't tell you how many broadband directors have been already stolen from state to go into the private sector and or to the federal government to go run these programs on the other side. And so there's been a lot of turnover. But we have been trying to have voices together. I will say, I can only say for us, sometimes it's hard for us to kind of sign off on things without permission of our governor's office. And so in some states, some people move a lot faster than other states, and so by the time we figure out there's a unified voice, the letter's already been sent in from maybe 12 of the states to maybe the FCC. But I think we're going to have some really good conversations this week with our partners and figuring out how to have a unified voice coming to the FCC. I think for us, really around the auctions.
And I think you'll see it also, our state digital equity plan is all due this fall, and so I think you'll see some very common issues around all the states.
Okay, because there are some collaborative opportunities. We'd love to hear from you guys, especially with the digital equity folks.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you. I know we've got about 10 or 12 more minutes, so do not be shy. Do not allow me more microphone time. Sir, go ahead.
You give a politician a microphone and you're.
I have no idea. Yeah, I know.
And you've just
hey,
done
let's give a
it,
politician
so
a
be
microphone.
very
Let's see how that goes. Exactly. Give us your name and where you're from and ask your question, sir.
My name's Mike Harris. I'm a member of provincial parliament from the beautiful province of Ontario. And we are having a lot of challenges very similar to you rolling out our broadband strategy. Our government has set aside about $4 billion just for the province. That's not federal money. So I think we're in good shape from a dollars perspective. But one of the challenges we're having is trying to just get it rolled out. And the gentleman who was speaking before, I think, alluded to some of those challenges. And I want to give you one example and see if there's something that you all have come across like this. So we've got public utilities, private utilities that wanted to charge somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 a pole while you're trying to run cabling, right? So we've got a lot of hard rock in our province. It's not easy to do directional drilling underground to run fiber. So we figured, well, let's try and partner with some of the local utilities to be able to do this. That's a lot of money, $15 per pole. So we've put some legislation forward, used some regulations and tools to be able to force them basically to lower that price and or try and do it for free. Have you run into any of those types of red tape barriers through your processes in your states?
We've run into the capacity of our cooperatives to keep up with the demand of the build-outs, more so than the cost. We do, like Sally said earlier, she has electric cooperatives that have broadband subsidiaries. So these folks often move as a body for us in Virginia. So even the cooperatives that are strictly electric cooperatives are partnering with their brother organizations or sister organizations that are not building out. And so we have some electric cooperatives that are running middle mile because they're all in the middle of doing grid transformation, and so they are working collaboratively. Where I've seen challenges for us is more so they've produced maybe 40 make-ready applications a year, and now they see 4,000 in a quarter, and so it's the capacity. The cost has not been an issue. I would tell you what other entity where there's been a cost problem for us. I can't say it out loud because there's an active lawsuit, but my legislator just left. But I can share with you on a side conversation about that industry that's been a barrier for us. It's not been the electric side. We also have the ability in Virginia, our investor-owned utilities, Dominion Virginia Power and Appalachian Power, have the ability to, through permission of our State Corporation Commission, build excess fiber as they're building out their middle mile for their needs to lease the capacity to last mile providers. And so our utility folks have been a part of the solution, so the costs have not been an issue from my understanding. It's been the capacity.
I would agree, except in certain situations. Pole attachment fees are always controversial, but it is the capacity.
Capacity.
Okay, gentleman in the red, I believe you're up next. Names, place, and question.
My name is Jason DeValdevielso from the Communications Workers of America out of Kentucky. My question is, as your respective states are working through crafting your 5-year plans, what type of discussions are you having about ensuring that this funding creates good-paying, sustainable jobs within your respective states?
We're going to continue to have those conversations with not only just our providers, but also we've engaged with some of our union folks within the state of Kansas to kind of make sure we're covering those spaces. It's one of the things that's required us to address in our 5-year action plan. And so as we get, at least for the state of Kansas, once we release that, we can go into a lot further detail about that. But that's something that's top of mind when we're looking at workforce.
I'm hoping that the Department of Labor will actually issue a prevailing wage, to be honest with you. I think it's been a struggle. We're in a state where the only way we have prevailing wages is on public funded projects as like a public owned asset, and so these aren't going to be publicly owned assets. And so we've been collecting data now for the last year, I think, through the ARPA and CPF reporting. And I thought last week when we were in Denver, something came out from the Department of Labor about prevailing wage. And so we're still waiting right now. I think NTIA is trying to figure out what's going to happen as well. But it's one of those things where we're dealing with cross-cutting federal rules, where it's Department of Labor, the BEAD money's with the Department of Commerce, kind of like the environmental review stuff is with EPA. And so I think that's going to be one of the conversations we'll have, because I've been doing, as I said earlier, federal grants for a long time. And so I've been doing broadband projects before I took this job. And so we're still waiting for wages from the Department of Labor for projects funded in 2019, because there's just the capacity hasn't been there at the federal level. And so more guidance from NTIA, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, did you have a question, or are you just standing back there? She was up there before you, sir. I'm in my chairman mode now. You go, and then you go, sir. Ma'am, where are you from? Your name and question.
Thank you so much. My name is Yolanda Cunningham. I'm with Communication Workers of America out of Tennessee. So my question, in your prospective states, what are you doing to ensure that there's a skilled workforce to deploy this broadband that uses OSHA safety standards? One, to ensure that this is a lasting broadband deployment, as well as two, to make sure that there's public safety as well as worker safety.
That's actually one of the questions in the volume 2 of the initial proposal that we all are working on right now. That's actually one of the questions that NTIA asked us in that document, to explain how we're going to coordinate and make sure that there's worker safety. And so the other thing too for us is our Virginia Department of Transportation, which actually oversees a lot of the permitting process. They have a process in place that we've been working through just all the other resources we've had. And it's ironic, because one of the things they made very clear was that, because there's been some issues where it was not part of a project we were building out, but there's been some concerns around safety of workers. And so we work very closely with our state transportation. They've actually hired a broadband coordinator so that they know where there are projects being built out within the state and that we can address safety issues. We coordinate with them on projects and permitting and processes. And so for us, we work closely with our Department of Transportation to make sure that folks are working in a safe environment.
Thank you.
Okay, good going, sir. Please, name and
Thank you. Rick Zimmerman with NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. And I don't know if I should be happy or be disturbed that our neighbors to the north have the same pole attachment problems that we have here in the U.S. But, you know, as acknowledged by the panel, it is a big issue. But I actually wanted to switch gears on another issue that was a veiled reference that is a problem in a number of states, which is crossing railroad rights-of-way.
I couldn't say that word, you know that.
Yes, so you couldn't say it, I'll say it for you. So for folks in the room, Virginia passed a really great piece of legislation. The American Railroad Association is claiming it's a takings, a Fifth Amendment violation, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, we're, I guess the state, the Solicitor General, will be going to court. But just wondering, you know, apart from legislation, and we certainly endorse legislation, whether there's ways to get the railroad folks to be more cooperative, since hopefully they share the same goal as all of you, as all of us, as the federal government and others, to get broadband everywhere, and that if it's difficult to cross railroad rights-of-way, then it's difficult to, you know, to get to the other side of the tracks, as it were, to bring broadband. So, you know, what can we do cooperatively to try to fix that problem? And Dr. Holmes, I understand you may not be able to
I can't answer that, because that could be used for discovery.
Yeah,
So.
right. But if
I
our
was
other
hoping you had
panelists
solved
might,
that problem,
No,
and you
might
had
have
the
an
answer.
opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Have you solved it in Kansas?
We're still looking into it, and it's something we're very much paying close attention to and paying attention. And I don't want to speak out of turn from the governor's office here, but something we're very much keenly aware of.
We all know it's a problem, and I'm sure every state's working on whatever solution they can get to it.
Good. Well, we're happy to assist in any way,
Thank
either
you.
with any of you or any of the legislators in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
Thank you, Representative Wilmoth. My name is Catherine DeWitt. I'm the project director for the Broadband Access Initiative at the Pew Charitable Trusts. Hello, colleagues. Nice to see you. You have a room full of state legislators and partners working in the states here. As legislators look at the rest of 2023 and into 2024, how can they help you in the months to come to help ensure that BEAD is as smooth as possible moving forward?
You should meet with your state broadband office and really listen to what their needs are, whether it might be some money for a vehicle or maybe some issues with procurement. Believe me, they have some issues. And if you would listen to your state broadband office and make an appointment and meet with them, I think it'd be very helpful. I think what you have to also understand, one thing I like to say is these programs, I heard it from somebody else, this is like the feds, they have their foot on the gas and on the brake at the same time. You know, it's coming, internet for all, but yet there are a lot of hoops and things you have to jump through. So understand, part of it is managing expectations, and I know you have to do that with your constituents. When I go to a community engagement meeting, the folks in Woodville, Mississippi think, oh, we're going to have internet in 3 or 4 months if Ms. Doty's here. But no, it's probably going to be 3 years because it's just going to take that long for the grant program to come out, for the awards to be made, for all the different hoops to go through. So manage expectations.
And I would think for me, one, there's a lot of money coming to Virginia, and so it does have to be appropriated. And so the next step for us is making sure that the funding gets appropriated. But in reality, I think it's important for state legislators maybe to have town halls within your district and bring together the folks that have the FCC money, the folks that have the USDA money, are folks that are working, because some of these providers are working across these federal funding programs, and so we do have a dashboard where it talks about how we're actively building out projects, but what's missing are the federal resources that are being built. And so I think it's important to really look at a community holistically and then share with folks where BEAD will go, where BEAD will be eligible, because these guys have done great community stakeholder engagement processes in their states. And I think that's where the legislative branch would be most helpful for us, is having those local meetings, talking to folks, and really pulling the providers together to find out what they can and cannot do. They will tell you they can't be in a room together because of antitrust laws, but they all get in a room together without all the rest of us, and it's not antitrust laws. But I would say town halls are very important so that we can manage expectations of residents who don't know the difference between an ARPA project funded through us and the FCC programs or the USDA, and so their neighbor will have broadband across the street because RDOF is on one side of the street and then the state money's on the other, and it's completely different providers. And so I think that'll help us be able to better manage expectations.
My most successful meetings have been a legislator-led meeting, or a legislature got it together for me. And it's going to be increasingly important for speed test data, where you have underserved areas. Mississippi, we also have a tool for collecting speed tests. You would think people would use it more. I only have about 6,000 or 7,000 responses as well. With the amount people complain about bad broadband service, you would think everybody would do that immediately. But getting that speed test data is going to be so important because, as you remember, the only data we have are what providers report. And sometimes they don't report exactly the fast, sometimes there's a little difference. So getting that information out, I would think your state's probably going to have a speed test tool as well.
Everything my colleagues have said, 100%, same thing here in Kansas, but also one thing to emphasize is the need for us to look into what can be done with technical assistance to the communities, because that's something we heard a lot in every single one of the communities is, I know what's going on, I know it's coming down, but how do I get it? How do I apply for this grant? How can I better understand this, and how can I engage the constituencies in these communities to really be an advocate and champion for these areas? Because we don't want to be put into a situation where, oh, these resources are available, the money's there, the opportunity is there, and then we find out a community is like, I just didn't know how to get it, so I became ineligible because I couldn't get a provider to go ahead and apply for these grants in my areas. And so really trying to figure out how we can better outreach, do better outreach through offering opportunities for that technical assistance for these communities, because our offices are really young and still are not equipped to be in these communities, each and every one of them, to provide this technical assistance training or clarification or being that resources. We're trying for sure, but it's just not enough to serve every single one of our communities that all desperately need this.
Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left. You two will be it. I will start with my friend from the state with the second coolest flag after Arizona, Maryland. Go for
Second
it.
coolest.
My flag's the best. Are you kidding me? Copper sunset? Come on now.
We love our flag, almost
for
as much as we love our Old Bay, and our Orioles.
Crab cakes and
But
football.
anyway, my name is Linda Foley, and I'm from the great state of Maryland. I'm a delegate. I used to be a national vice president of the Communications Workers of America, and my sisters and brothers got up and talked about workforce standards in this industry. And I just wanted to make a pitch for, to just kind of step back a little bit and think about telephone and how we in this country wired everybody to telephone. Yeah. You know, we had, like before we I realize it's a different industry, and I also realize that it was a monopoly, and I'm not saying that we should go back to a monopoly, but we do need to think a little bit about leveling the playing field, and in terms of the providers, so that, you know, some of these issues will get addressed if we put in requirements, and some of this has to be on a national level, right? But we we make requirements of the providers to make sure that they are helping us level the playing field before we ramp up to 10G, 20G, 25G, wherever we're going, because we are leaving people behind. And so I just wondered if there are any proposals out there or anything you're aware of in terms of universal service fees or, you know, anything like that that would help us level the playing field.
We're in a lightning round.
I think that's beyond the scope of this this talk today, and something that we all will be looking at in the future. Yes.
There you go. Sir, you're going to close this out. Before I close this out, go ahead.
Very appreciated. I'm Senator Wayne Harper. I'm the Senate President Pro Tem in Utah, and I appreciate everything that's going on here. Just briefly, Utah has chosen to go through and have a legislator-led committee for the BEAD program and the rolling out of all these funds to ensure that it goes statewide. But one of the things that I think we need to remember here is we've got the Affordable Connectivity Program. The funding of that rolls out. Both of these are integral. We need to make sure the BEAD and the ACP are done. This goes to what she's talking about. We need to have, in order to make the BEAD truly successful, we need to have the adoption in order to make it done. And that's just my point. We need to make sure and take a position as NCSL in that to support the ACP continuation. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to slowly allow you to leave. You can't leave yet because I didn't tell you. The NCSL staff are also in the process of creating a broadband legislation database. This will be published on NCSL's website in the coming weeks, and it will be a great resource for legislators and staff. For those attending on site, please join us for our CFI committee business meeting in room 143, 145 at 2:45. You'll be stuck with me again. For those watching online, next up is the Victory of Retreat. George Washington and the Art of Leadership will start at 2:45. And if anybody wants to hang out, we can play a Guess the Age game, you think? What do you think? Is that good? No? Awkward? Bad? Thank my panelists for showing up today, for doing a great job. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good afternoon.